Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I am just thrilled to introduce Kelly Coffey today. The Pacific Council and City National Bank are two spectacular LA institutions, and I can take no credit for the success of either of them, but I am happy to be enhanced by association. Kelly is only the fourth CEO in the entire history of City National Bank, which was founded 67 years ago by a group of local business people, including actually my great-grandfather, to help the booming and actually underserved entertainment and real estate industries. From the beginning, both the vision and the execution have always been about excellent customer service, extraordinary professionalism, and always doing the right thing, not just for the bank's clients and shareholders, but also for its colleagues and the broader community. That small neighborhood bank today has more than 70 offices across the country, from San Francisco to Miami, from Nashville to New York. In 2015, it was acquired, as many of you know, by the Royal Bank of Canada. And despite some speculation to the contrary, never lost the special sauce or its personal touch. And in 2019, City National was extraordinarily lucky to recruit Kelly Coffey as its CEO. Prior to joining, she was CEO of JP Morgan's US private bank. She also spent more than 20 years at the firm's investment bank, including 6 years living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And her international credentials also include majoring in foreign affairs and French, and receiving a Master's of Science degree in Foreign Service from Georgetown. Kelly has led City National through what you all know is an enormously challenging period with COVID and an uncertain economy. Just during her tenure, though, assets under management have grown from $73 billion to $96 billion. She's also focused heavily on diversity and inclusion. She was named the DEI CEO of the Year by the LA Business Journal, as well as, of course, one of the most influential Angelenos, one of the most powerful people in banking, et cetera, many accolades over the years. She serves on the board of SNAP, as well as the Leadership Council of US Vets, which is the nation's largest veterans services nonprofit. Kelly is obviously a titan of this industry, a trailblazer, a philanthropist, and a really good person. And I am very excited to hear what she has to say today.
So why don't I pick it up from there, Brian? Kelly, welcome again. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for joining us for this Fireside Chat. I'm Rob Lovelace, co-chair of the Pacific Council with Rich Getz. I have a day job also in the finance industry, which is probably why they picked me to do this at the Capital Group, based here in Los Angeles. So the Pacific Council, Kelly, as you know, has a mission of building the capacity of Los Angeles and California for impact on global issues, discourse, and policy. And I know you're a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, so you're very connected to that. So if we can start actually with your journey, because as Brian outlined, you start with a degree in international affairs and French, you get your master's in foreign service, and I think I've also heard that you had a lot of finance and banking in your background and family and history as well. So how did those two rivers flow together? And how did you end up here in LA at City National?
Well, thanks, Rob, for that question. And thank you, Brian, for that kind introduction. And we'll get to your father, who's the reason why I ended up in LA, Russell Goldsmith. So yeah, what a journey. I have been called many times the accidental banker, which is the way I think of myself. I did, you went through my background in terms of what I studied. And, when I came out of, when I was at Georgetown, the Foreign Service, I worked in the government because we were lucky to be in Washington. And I was at the U.S. Trade Reps office for a while. And I oversaw one of the programs that was trying to promote for Latin American countries, a higher price and a more generalized system of preferences. It was called basically imports into the U.S. of a higher level of good from Latin America. And I just saw the government up front and personal. I always thought I'd go back to something there or something in international business, but I didn't do an MBA. And I thought, the right way to get that really detailed finance experience was to go into banking, and I interviewed with a lot of firms, and decided on JP Morgan. And JP Morgan was a very global firm at the time, which is the reason I decided to do that. I was pretty quickly drafted into the Latin America team and spent almost 5 years of my early career working in Buenos Aires, as you said, and I, during the privatization. So I did a lot of different things at JP Morgan, because I didn't intend to be in banking for a long time. So my attitude was very much, I want to be working for smart people where I'm learning. I want to continue to learn. And so I did some very atypical things for banking. I mean, I moved from, I went down to Buenos Aires, then I went back up, and I moved from M&A Latin America, mostly focused on Latin America, to trading convertible bonds, which was like learning a different language. And so I did a lot of different things. And I decided at one point, I realized that I actually really liked the banking industry, where, anything that's going on in the world and anything that's going on in the news can impact my day, and does impact my day in a meaningful way, whether it's the markets, whether it's what's going on in the global world. And I found that translating that down to business was something that I really liked. But you are right. In some ways, I've come a little bit full circle, and I can talk about the transition from JP Morgan to City National. But my grandfather was a banker, among other things, and he ran a small community bank in Pennsylvania. And as a little child, my father, when I was only about 2, volunteered to go be a surgeon in Vietnam. And my mom and I lived with my grandparents, and I was very close, extraordinarily close to my grandparents. And my grandfather, would take me to work all the time, and I would go and drive everybody in the bank crazy. I'd want to see the tellers, and I'd want to greet people. And then as I got older, I did summer jobs there, running credit reports and things. So I do feel a little bit like I've come full circle from investment banking back to something that's more like extending credit, and what my grandfather did every day in, day out. Relationships have always been really important to me. So I guess the other part of your question, and interrupt me if I'm rambling too much, but how I got to LA. I met Russell, and I told him that I would never leave JP Morgan, that I enjoyed meeting with him, but I had no interest in leaving. I was actually trying to make him a client of JP Morgan's private bank. I thought that was a good thing for him, and I didn't succeed. And here I am. And over a year, every time he came to New York, we'd get together. When I would come out to LA, I had a big business here, we would talk. And I just thought that the culture at City National was very much in line what I believe. I like to call us a team with family values, very client first. And I think that the opportunity was so exciting, because it's that combination of maintaining that relationship and almost like a hometown bank feel, with a very personalized approach, but with the underpinnings of capabilities of a large bank, and particularly with the RBC transaction of a large global bank that's $1 trillion+ balance sheet. And I think a client said it to me really well last week. A new client said, I think you're the best of big and the best of small. And that's what I think is the opportunity. I've been at an incredibly well-run big bank. I have tremendous experience, respect, and I grew up at JP Morgan, but there's drawbacks from there. So City National felt like that much more entrepreneurial, fun bank that's growing quickly.
Well, let me pick up on some of the threads you put there about LA and the best of both worlds, being owned by a Canadian bank, but having that strong local presence. The Pacific Council is very focused on global LA, and I think all of us would argue LA kind of punches under its weight when you look at business in general, certainly in foreign policy. It's a big part of what the Pacific Council is trying to help help us build here. What's been your experience with JP Morgan clearly is a global bank. What's your experience on that front, and how has LA surprised you in that regard, both positively and also areas where you see maybe we could do better?
Yeah, LA, it's interesting. Over the years, I've come here for business for a very long time, and LA was seen as a very, focused on one industry city, as you all know. Media and entertainment was, Hollywood was what LA was known for, and I think that's something that has changed over time, and it's really changed in LA more than maybe the rest of the world has caught up with us. because I think, well, that's a tremendously global industry, and that's an industry that I think we should continue to. I think we would benefit from continuing to being known for, and to really attract even more of what's going on in production back to LA. I think the additional tax credits that the governor approved is a start, but I think we could even go further. So I think that puts LA on the grand stage. I also think, I love to remind the Canadians that there's more people in California than in their whole country, and they don't really like when I say that, but it's a really complicated, sophisticated, big economy here. And I think the vibrancy of this economy is really important. So I think we have a real role to play on the global stage, because more and more of our companies are global. And I think that's one of the ways we can then exert more influence. And in that vein, I think LA's, when I think about how LA's doing, I think, consumer spending's clearly up about 6% year on year. I think unemployment's continuing to decline. We're very optimistic, and I can talk more about that if you'd like me to. The housing market is strong. The trade is, while we've got some supply chain disruption, trade is pretty strong, which obviously the port is a significant part of LA. I think people overlook that when they're not from LA. It's up 27+% year on year. And of course, 2020 was a very difficult year for there. So I think the LA economy with technology moving in is and I think when you compare and contrast, particularly what's going on in Northern California with Southern California, is becoming more and more an attractive place to be within California. Now, that being said, what am I concerned about? I mean, it's very hard to do business here. I hear it from our clients all the time, and I've said this to the governor, and I think there is a mindset that needs to shift to make sure, whether it's from a tax perspective is the obvious one, but it's almost impossible for some of our companies to really comply with all the regulations. And so if we want to continue to be a strong economy that's going to have a place on the global stage, we need to continue to attract talent to LA. And I think we're going the wrong way on that right now.
Are you, just on that regard, do you find, LA's got its own leadership and complexities of its leadership here and in the state level? Do you work more with the state level, or are you very focused on the city of LA and the leadership here?
I'd say both, really both. I mean, listen, I'll talk to anybody who will listen to me about what I think and what we think, more than just me, about what our clients need. And I have found throughout my career, I've found, while they may want to meet with us, the government doesn't really listen particularly well, and that I find pretty frustrating. So you have to, I think it's still my job to go and make sure our voices are heard. I sometimes feel like it can be a waste of time, but I still do it. And that's something I've done throughout my whole career. I mean, in the middle of the financial crisis, Jamie kept sending me down to DC to continue to explain why derivatives were good for certain companies to use, and I kept going down because he made me do it. And I think it is an important part of, and you just have to figure out ways that you can communicate. What I did then, which I take great pride in. I think it was Rahm Emanuel or someone calling to complain about me. I set up a big call with all these big company CFOs to explain how I wasn't going to be able to provide credit through derivatives to them if a certain part of the legislation went through. And I got Ford and Microsoft and all companies that I dealt with for a long, long time. And they went down and tried to translate it into jobs and were giving the administration a hard time. That was how they listened to us. So I think it's our job to try to translate it into what that politician maybe cares about, which is not always easy to get, the financial impact into simple enough terms that they can sell it, and kind of understand and move on it, because there's a healthy degree of skepticism, for a lot of good reasons around our industry in government. But I think I have found California maybe it's pretty complicated. It's a politics in California and LA. The dispersion of power in terms of the elected officials, I find a bit difficult to get things done. And I rely a lot on Russell to help make sure we're focused in the right area there with some of the work he's done with the LA Coalition and other organizations.
Well, I can definitely relate, and it sounds like you're focused on the right things. In the context you're a philanthropist. We'll get onto this a little bit more. You're involved in a lot of areas, including your care for veterans and other DE&I and ESG and other related issues. But one of the big things, obviously, that's coming up right now, it really post-great financial crisis, but emphasized by what happened with COVID, is the wealth gap. And I know you're not a retail bank, and Capital Group's kind of in a similar position. We don't work that directly with people, but I think when everyone looks at our industry, they see it a bit monolithically, as you're saying. It's complex. We understand all the different pieces of it, but people look at us somewhat monolithically. So since you care and since you're focused in these areas, either what are you doing individually or what is City National doing to kind of get at some of these broader issues of both understanding our industry and the wealth gap in particular?
Yeah. So why don't I start with City National, then I can talk a little bit about what I've done personally. I mean, I think I know one of the reasons that I felt very comfortable with City National and part of the culture, we talk about the 3 C's, doing well by our clients, our communities, and our colleagues. And so it's a very purpose-driven organization, and it has been for a very long time. Our colleagues believe that they want to give back to their communities, and we do well by doing good. Right? It's good when the community does well, we do better as a bank. So it actually makes dollars and cents as well for the bank. So, whether it's things that we do to support, particularly when I look through the last year, right? The entertainment industry was one of the hardest hit. When you look at what Broadway still closed until the middle of September, basically. And so we did a lot for our community through that, and supported not only the entertainment community, but each of the communities we live in. So I'd start with, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, that hit us like a tsunami right after moving most of our people to work from home. And we did over $6 billion of that for small business clients, which is a lot. And it was more than 26,000 or something. That was critical to our clients. Small businesses, truly a backbone of this country. And I think that's one way we could help with our expertise and continue to serve that. We also, and Russell also, pre me coming in, opened a bank in the Crenshaw district, which has done incredibly well. And it's another way that we're investing in the entrepreneur economy there. And then, of course, we do, I love that we spend our money to put not only through how we extend loan and how we give PPP loans or whatever else we're doing for our clients, but we also are very consistent in giving to our communities. And I like to say that we always pair the dollars with our expertise and our volunteer hours. Our colleagues volunteer a lot of hours to do that. So, we did, in addition to the community development loans that we did over $1 billion in 2020. We did $12.5 billion over 5 years since the transaction with RBC. So we exceeded our 5-year commitment we made to lend $11 billion in community lending and investment, which is a huge aspirational goal, and we got there. And 2020 was another year where, for example, what we do, colleagues gave away more than 20,000 of their hours, a lot of it virtually, of volunteer work in 2020. Although yesterday, about 50 of us went and volunteered for Baby for Baby in person, one of their first in-person packing events, which we had a great time doing. We've also done, financial literacy is something we have expertise in. So we launched our financial literacy program, Dollars and Cents, and our bankers go and teach financial literacy lessons in schools, after school programs, community organizations. We gave over $1 million to teach financial literacy in the LI public schools. We partnered with Everfi on that, which was really, it's something everybody needs to know coming out of high school. And so I think that's really critical. And education has been a personal passion for me in my personal philanthropy. And then we gave away over $13 million in 2020, the largest donation in our history, to $2 million to support early COVID-19 efforts. And we also gave to social justice organizations. So, Project Angel Food, I could go on and on, but, while we're based in LA and we obviously direct a lot at LA, we also, our reach is national. So we go beyond that, whether it's some things we do in Atlanta. We co-created a grant program with the mayor's office called Creatal for grants for gig workers in that local economy. We partnered with, you probably saw Richard and Demi Weiss do Quarantunes this year. We did a lot with them, which was for entertainment Nashville, we've done a lot. We're big country music, so we're big in Nashville. So we do a lot with that community. Those are just a couple of the examples that City National does. And so we do well through our business, we do well through donations, and we do well through giving our time. And then I personally, I probably am still a little bit more weighted to New York. I'm making that shift with the work I've done at Central Park. I've been on a board of one of the big charter schools there. And then here, as you said, I got involved with US Vets because I think homelessness is a huge issue, and particularly around the veteran population and how to support them. My good friend Jeremy Zimmer highlighted it to me, and I thought it was something that aligned. You know, my father's a veteran, and I just think when somebody sacrifices what they sacrifice for our country to not take care of them when they come home, it's a very complicated problem, but we should do everything we can to do that. So it's really important to me personally, and it was important to me to be part of an organization that felt like it was also important to that organization. And I can tell you, every single person at City National is really proud of everything we do and wants to personally contribute. I should mention one more thing that I thought in the COVID donations that was really great is we actually created a colleague fund so people could give to other colleagues who were in hardship. And we had a separate organization make those grants. So, you know, it just shows the team with family values that I like to say is really present at City National.
Well, it's an amazing list that you went through. I think I want to focus in, and in a few minutes here, we'll get into questions from others too. But, you know, this has been a tough period. You came in, I guess, you know, without much time before we got into the COVID period. You mentioned the rush of people. You just got everyone home, and then you had the PPP loans come through. So it's been a really tough period. Talk a little bit about your leadership style in general, because I think people are really interested, right? And I think that's what you get highlighted for, and you've been recognized recently for your unique leadership skills. So talk a little bit about that. I think with the spirit being, you know, people are just interested in what makes you different as a leader and what makes you distinct.
Well, you know, I think as a leader, I tend to be a team builder, what I've been good at. So even though I was at JP Morgan a long time, I jumped in to either fix broken businesses or build businesses. So, and that always involved getting the right team around the table to do that. And it's about making sure that you've got a diverse team, diverse from a lot of different perspectives, diversity of thought, and all the other aspects that come with that. And I've been good at that. And every time I went to do that, I was really careful that when I went to do my next thing, I didn't just steal the team that I had last put in place for the last thing. I actually recreated. And every time I do that, you get to a point like, this is hard. I can't believe I decided to do this again, but I must like it because I continually do it. And I think that's something that I like. I'm also a very collaborative leader, and what I mean by that is I like a lot of feedback. I like to hear different sides of the issue, and when I'm making a decision, and maybe I do that to the point where it's you know, some people might think it's too much, but I like that, and then I think I make a better decision. But once I've made a decision, you got to get on or off the bus. You can't slow the bus down. So I like debate and I like to hear the other side, but then when we make a decision, we're moving forward and everybody's got to go. And I once I do make a decision, I'm pretty straightforward. And I just think I tell it to people like it is. And I think they appreciate that. I take feedback. I learned pretty early in my career. I've worked for some pretty tough people. I don't take feedback personally in the sense of getting offended. I take it constructively, and either I agree or disagree with it, and I figure out what I do with that. When I came to City National, in addition to getting feedback a lot of different ways, I'm always out, whether it's visiting in a typical time, and I'm back now, visiting branches or traveling and sitting down with groups of people. But I did find, you know, even when I was running big parts of the organization at JP Morgan, that sometimes if the people aren't in front of you every day, they don't want to sit in front of you that one time and give you some negative feedback because they're with you and they want it to be a positive experience. So I launched something I've done over the years called Tell Kelly. It's really just an email box that anybody in the company can send me feedback, an idea, question, whatever it is. And it's gotten a lot of uptake. We answer every single one. And then I get great ideas from it. And then we also then update the bank periodically on here are the changes. So we've made changes, everything from, it caused me pretty early in my career to look at our maternity leave, and we doubled it because it was, I thought it could be longer. We also, you know, it can be things as small as, you know, why don't we play music in our branches? We did that, and now we play music in our branches. Or it can be something about, our online system isn't good here, or, and I aggregate it so that I'm not just reacting to anecdotal, I'm seeing it a little bit more, and we get some really great ideas and feedback that way. So, and then, I think you also have to trust your team. I'm a trust but verify leader too. So I think as long as you lay out the vision and you're making sure people are really discussing the issues, I have all sorts of little sayings: no meeting after the meeting, say what you mean in the meeting, those types of things to encourage teams to make sure they can trust one another, to respectfully disagree, at least when you're in the room. And then when you're in the virtual room, as we are today, and then move on. So those are some of the things that I think people would say about me as a leader.
Just to push you a little bit on one of those, give me an example of some advice that someone gave you that ended up being really critical and changed your style, but that you maybe didn't want to hear at the time. I mean, if you can, and also, do you only play country music in your branches because you're so big?
No, we play all types of music in our branches, though. But it did take us a while to come up with the playlist. So, but in Nashville, we may only play country music in there. Feedback that sometimes you don't hear feedback the right way. And so a couple times in my career, I would hear, I think you're too nice. You're not creating enough, especially when I was in a big organization. You're not, it can't be that everybody thinks you're like, how are you getting things done? You're not moving fast enough. Maybe you're too nice. And I for a long time said, I just have a different style of getting things done. And so it's okay. As long as I'm getting things done at the pace I want, I feel okay with that. But it is something I keep in my mind, and it did change because I do think after I kind of accepted it, I realized that sometimes I'm not someone who seeks conflict, but sometimes I was letting things go a little bit too long where I could have nipped it in the bud, particularly as you get to more senior levels where I was just avoiding it. And then I had to, I learned from a great mentor of mine one time, sit down on a Sunday and make a list of all the things you've been avoiding, right? What are the things you should be doing that you're not doing? I'm a big list maker and follow-up lists and, an execution. And I think that was something that I learned was true. Maybe I was being a little bit too nice and polite, and you don't always have time. I mean, you always want to be polite and respectful, but you don't always have, sometimes you just have to hit the conflict head on. And I found that once I did that more, it's kind of a relief, that you just say what you mean, and you don't worry if somebody else. I have I've also been told once, like, very high EQ. And so the good part of that is I'm great. I was always great in sales and running marketing teams. And I was always good at, especially with clients, they're not really going to know what I think necessarily because I can hide that. That's the good part about it. The bad part about it is you kind of always know, you have a feel for what the other person's thinking sometimes. And it can maybe shift the way you say something, what you say. And I have to overcorrect a little bit for that.
Right. We had a question that came in related to your perceptions about barriers. So I wanted to pivot anyway a little bit into diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
As you came through it, did you perceive there were particular barriers for you or challenges that were unique, and how did you overcome them?
I like to say a lot. I've never been a man, so I don't know what the difference would be if I was a man in the business. I do know I've been called, different times in my career, the spotted owl. There were so few women at the table and in so many of the groups I worked in, although I think that's changed in a meaningful way in banking and in finance in general. I mean, earlier in my career, as I said, I spent some time in Argentina, and I was one of two women in the office. And it was interesting because I just used it. I didn't see it as a drawback, and I think I'm just kind of stubborn, and I just moved forward. And I didn't really feel the need to have a role model that was a woman that I was looking to, as some people will say now. That just wasn't the way I thought about the world. But the way there, it worked to my advantage is, in general, the men in Argentina wouldn't interrupt me. And so I learned that I could actually get my point across more than some of the men could. And so they would send me into the tougher, sometimes they would send me into I had much more CEO time, because they're never going to be upset with Kelly. Send her to tell the guy that. and she'll get them there in a good way where we won't ruin our relationship. So I think I used that kind of thing earlier in my career to my advantage. But I do see some similarities with women that I think I probably suffered from, and that I had some people, push me over time. I've had some great bosses. I've had some really, really bad ones. But some that really pushed me that I learned from. I see that with women in particular, and maybe a little bit with other diversity group, with other minorities, a lack of self-confidence, and that can sort of hold back ambition a bit. So, I've many times given a promotion or a big new job to a woman, and my first conversation with them, they'll say, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Yeah, you need these 10 things and I only have 7. Or I have never had a man say that to me in my entire career. And I think most of them walk in the office thinking they could do my job better than I do it. And I think women need to, again, this is a bit of a generalization, but I always say, don't do that. You're going to figure it out. I wouldn't be offering it to you if I didn't think you can do it. And I don't expect you to have 100% day one on the job. Nobody does, if they're really being honest. So I think that, and speaking up, and, there's other things people have written about. I do think there's a little bit of, are you taking your seat at the table? Are you kind of projecting yourself? Is a senior enough person? We used to do a few things where we would give feedback to women about, how they were carrying themselves, how they spoke, because certain audiences won't react well or hear you certainly in finance and business settings if you're not have a certain presence. So, I really don't think it held me back. I think, but maybe it did in certain capacities, and I just didn't notice it.
Yeah, it's hard to know what you don't know. So
I don't know what you don't know, but it's so important. I mean, every group I've had, I've made more diverse, and part of it is just I really believe you make better decisions. So I have methodically worked at making sure our senior leadership team has representation of a mix of male and female, a mix of introverts and extroverts, people of color, Asian American, all of as much as I possibly can. And, you can't sort of do it in a snap section, but if it's important to you and you make it clear, we've just set some internal goals in terms of where we want to be. We're a pretty diverse organization. We need to be more diverse at the top, and we've made a lot of progress on that, but we will. Latinos on our executive committee. And so I've got two people in specific who are really focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, to make sure that we're making progress against the things I want to make progress. We're setting goals, and we actually have a programmatic approach. The other thing I say all the time, this is a movement, not a moment. And so it's got to be a continual investment of time there. So we've done a number of things that I can talk about in terms of how we recruit, changed a lot, that I think when you focus, you can make a big difference.
Well, I think, with the short time that we have, and again, a lot of questions have come in about culture. So I think you can kind of weave it together, Kelly. But I know at Capital, we've got a very strong culture, and we're very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And sometimes that's a challenge, right? Because you've had a way you've done things for a long period of time, and that's inclusive to many, but it's not inclusive to all. So you've come in, you've affected culture. Well, you've inherited a strong culture.
Yep.
And you tried to put your mark on it. You've brought in a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion changes. So how is that playing out? And how do you keep that great culture and get it to change? And then you've got a group of owners that have their own culture and that you have to interact with. So how are you juggling all those different aspects of it?
How long do you have? Just kidding, Rob. It is probably the number one thing that I spend time thinking about, and also with my leadership team, because we have a couple of cross currents going. One of the great parts of City National and why the culture is so great is the longevity of the leadership team that Russell had. But what that meant, and one of the attractive parts, as I said, I like to build teams of coming in, is there was going to be a transition of leadership. So CEO, president, CFO, CRO, general counsel, more than half of our executive committee, our top 20 people, senior people in the company are new, or in a couple of promotions. So that's a lot of change in 2 years, not to mention a pandemic on top of it. And so what I'm focused on there is every person who I've selected new with a skill set to take us further has been at a larger organization because we've grown very quickly, as Brian outlined up front. And they've seen where we're going in a sense, but they also see the value of doing it a different way. What are the downsides of sometimes where you get to be in a very large organization, and they want to do it different, and they had appreciation for the City National culture of client first, and how we think about excellence, entrepreneurship, agile, how we move quickly, relationships being really important, strong credit culture, all of those things that we wanted to keep. So their coming in is really important with that the new approach. But then I have some tremendously valuable long-term City National colleagues who Martha Henderson, who's led our entertainment group, Aaron Cohen, who leads specialty finance, and their perspective is really important in terms of that culture of City National, what makes City National special, the secret sauce. How do you make sure you retain that? And it's the collaboration of those two mindsets that's going to make us successful. And to be, I think where we are right now, completely upfront about it, we have more bonding to do as an organization because we've added a lot of people, and the last year, some of them have just met. I just had our first executive committee offsite in person in July, and some people were meeting in person for the very first time because so that is something that I think takes a lot of focus, discussion, probably more being together than apart until we get used to the rhythm of work and more informal things of more discussions about culture. That's really important to us. And then, I think the RBC culture is very consistent in a lot of ways with City National in terms of purpose and approach, but it's a much larger organization. And so and I think that's a real advantage for us. But what I say to all of my RBC colleagues is don't crush the butterfly. You're 80,000 people, we're 5,400. We need your help, but we don't need it all at once. And we can't have it. We have to maintain our own space and maintain our own pace in many ways. We're frankly much faster because we can be. And so we've got to, so that is also, we're trying to take the best of big and the best of small, even though we're not really that small in the US, and as we continue to grow, and as we continue to grow, that's going to be our challenge. How do we keep our agile relationship focused bank when we know we're actually a large bank? We're looked at it as a large bank. We have the same regulators as a large bank. We have a whole lot of hoops we have to jump to as a large bank. And I think we can do it better than that in terms of making sure we're still being responsive and doing what our clients need and helping our clients on the way up and to grow but still keeping our own house in order. And that's a big challenge for us. I think we're up to it, but it's a big challenge.
Well, we know you're up for it. Let me ask one last question, just because I'm mindful of time that came in, and then I'll give you a chance for a close, and then I have one final close to put on it. But you mentioned early on that one of the challenges, you worked for some good bosses, and you also had some, I can't remember the term, but it was less positive than good. And I think all of us struggle with this in organizations. So I'm sure, I know you don't like it, but I'm sure somewhere in your organization there's some people that also have that similar toxic toxicity to what they're doing, and how do you stay connected to that? How do you identify that? And may not be you directly intervening in it, but it's a critical part to maintaining a healthy and happy culture. So
it is. I once had a board member at JP Morgan say, you know what? You should just know with your organization, there's somewhere in this country doing something you would be appalled at right now. You just know that, right? And so I hope that's not the case, but that is the likelihood. And I think you have to be. If I were to say what is a part of the culture that I want to tweak and continue to tweak, I've been very visible about asking for feedback, and even when it's tough feedback, being positive in the answer to that, and making sure people don't feel like we're ever going to shoot the messenger about something, because I think we need to be a bit more direct in talking to one another about what we really need to improve. And I think we're getting better and better at that. And that's a challenge I know a lot of organizations have. And so, how people lead is another example of that. I have said to people when they talk about, as we add people, as we grow, how are we going to keep our great culture? And I answer that a lot of times in a quick answer: just don't hire any jerks. You're all in control of it, right? And if you hire any, because you make a mistake, get rid of them quickly, which means I have to do it too. And so I have to make sure I'm getting feedback. Again, that's why I like meeting with people, and a lot. I have to rely on some of my leadership to be bringing me, and it's also the way I learned that with my daughter. When they're coming to tell you something you might not want to hear, your reaction is really important. You can't react in a negative way right up front. You have to listen, consider, and I'm good at doing that, because remember, I can hide what I think pretty easily. I know I can, because I've done it, in many sales type, client situations where a client, is telling you something that you don't agree with, but you've got to get them there. I'm glad I say I went to school for foreign service. It's a good thing I'm good in diplomacy. It's been useful for my job. So I think my openness enables that I can, that I hopefully hear about it, but it's an ongoing focus for me to make sure we're getting the right feedback and I'm taking action. And, we've had a couple of things happen where I've taken action on people. And I think that message sends a strong message, where if somebody does something that is clearly outside of the bounds of what you expect, that you move on it and you address or move them out. And those are tough decisions, but you've got to make them. And I think if you send that message consistently enough to the organization, that's the way I try to do it. But it's never easy, because when you have a lot of people, everybody takes a bit of a different approach, and you can never fully know what's going on in every location around the country in a big organization. You have to trust your leaders to be trickling it down too.
Well, I appreciated you bringing our children as teachers into this conversation, because that is critical for how we learn, and if we can react well to it, it helps us. All right, so want to end on a positive note. So I'm going to throw you just a huge wide open. What are you most excited about right now? Not limited to City National. What are you most excited about right now?
Oh, there's a hard one. Most excited. Well, I was getting really excited about this acceleration out of the pandemic, and maybe the Delta, that just walking through my branch and seeing everybody's faces with no masks on was getting me really excited. And the way the economy was springing back, even though there's some concerns about inflation that I definitely share. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about a lot of the direction that I think we can take, not only this business, but the country. That we've got a lot of problems, and it's easy to get down on them. I can't even look at what's going on in Afghanistan now, and there's so many issues that are going on in the world. But I actually am a natural optimist, and I still think with all of our issues, we've got the best country on the planet, and I think we've got so much at our fingertips in terms of incredible resources in our country. I wish we had stronger leadership across the board in government, and we've got to figure that out to take advantage of it. But I'm always incredibly surprised about how resilient the country is, the economy is, no matter what is going on. The press always makes it sound so terrible, but you know what? It's never as terrible as they make it sound, and it's never as good as they make it sound. So, I'm also excited. I'm excited to be in LA. I'm a New Yorker. I was a long-term New Yorker, East Coaster. Despite today, the weather is so much better, and it turns out I love to hike. So I'm also pretty excited about all of the new people I've met in LA and the relationships I've formed. I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. So I'm really grateful that Russell found me and dragged me out of New York and convinced me to move across the country to do this, because it's a lot of fun.
Well, you've passed the test line. Usually, the people that come here, if they stay more than a year, they never leave, or they never make it through that year. So welcome to LA, and we're glad you like it. On behalf of the Pacific Council, I really want to thank you for making the time for us. Brian Goldsmith, thank you for bringing Kelly to us. And, as I said, I know that you're a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. You may not know, but the Pacific Council started actually as under the umbrella of the CFR. So those are our roots. And I would like to award you membership in the Pacific Council as a way of saying thank you. So we hope you'll come to other meetings and
Thank you. I love
share
that.
your foreign policy and business experience with us in other settings. It's a very special group that I'm proud to be a part of and have been for many years. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your frank answers to the questions. I had a lot more to talk about than we had time to get into on all these different issues, but appreciate you as a leader here in LA. There's a lot to do, and the spirit with which you're taking it on, I think, is super helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. I look forward to coming to a meeting in person one day.
Those will be soon, and a lot of different activities. And it's a membership-based organization. It's all about connection. So having you as a part of the group would be fantastic. Thank you.
That'd be great. I appreciate it. Well, thank you for all your great questions. Good spending
Thanks.
time.
Nice to talk to you. Yeah, look forward to seeing you in person.